Thanks for taking the time to join today's webinar, Better Together, RPI and Birst, delivered by our very own Aaron Epps, and also joining us remotely from Infor, we have Mr. John Duda. And with that, I give you Aaron and John.
Thanks, guys. Good afternoon, everyone. So we're here today, John and I, to talk about RPI and Birst and how working together with the best Birst partner and the best Lawson partner is going to accelerate your time to value as part of your BI and analytics implementation. So there's a few things I want to cover as we get started. So first, I want to talk about some common pain points that we see when we're working with customers. Some of the issues that people are running into, especially those that are on V10, maybe still using LBI or Excel today. I want to lay some foundational understanding about what are the core components in analytics, what's a data model, what's the pre-built content, why would you care as a business user, how would you practically use it. And then we're going to get into, John's going to talk about the value-based design methodology that we utilize. And then I'm going to talk about how RPI has taken that methodology and added our Lawson expertise on top of it to make the implementation even smoother for our Lawson customers. And then we'll have summary and Q&A at the end. Okay, so one of the common challenges that we see when we often work with customers today, when we first come in to work with them, is that they have this IT-centric reporting model, right? And so this is a model where basically business analysts are unable to access the information that they need to do their job, or if they can get it, it usually takes longer than they want, and so they sometimes have to make decisions based on gut feel. Most people that we work with, they usually have to go to IT to get information. If they have an ad hoc request, they have to go to them again to get that same report or extract modified. IT tries to turn those requests around as quickly as they can, but of course they come up in an ad hoc manner. It's hard to plan for that, and so it can often take hours or days to turn around and get those reports. On top of just getting the data, you have to actually know where the data is, and that's another problem that people have is the Lawson data structure is very large and very complex. And if you've worked with your IT partner, you've probably spent time looking through table names like the MSD, SACK, and some of the others I've listed in the second sub-bullet, trying to figure out, okay, where is the data that I need? Where does it live? What other tables do I have to join it with? And then developing that SQL or that stored procedure to get it. That's time consuming and tedious. And it's something you might do and then you might not do it again for a few months. So you have to go through that process again. So there's a lot of hunting and gathering that goes on during your business day. One of the other problems that we often see is that there's a lot of people that spend a significant amount of time running extracts from different systems. So they may have to run extract from system A, put it into Excel, run it from system B, put it into Access, run some formulas on it, eventually get to the point where you then create a PDF and distribute it. And a lot of the customers that we work with, this type of work goes on a regular basis. They're doing it to produce weekly or bi-weekly or monthly reports. So there's a lot of time and efforts that's being consumed with those types of activities. And even for Lawson customers, there's a lot of legacy reports that you may have to run multiple versions of, and then you have to kind of manually collate that all together yourself. You may have to run a report once per vendor, and then you get 40 or 50 of those reports, and then you have to figure out a way to combine all that data together. There's certainly an easier way to do that, and we'll talk about that once we get into kind of the implementation best practices. So as a result of these problems of not being able to get data or to get it in the window that you have to make a business decision, a lot of people make decisions based on instinct, right? Not by data. They have to go with their gut feel. They have to go with the status quo. Well, this is what we did last month, or this is what we did last year. So I guess that's what we're going to do this year. But you don't have any data to back up that business decision and why you went the path that you did. And then the other problem we often see is that there are often data silos throughout the organization. So one of the ways that people have responded to these problems is they've used BI and reporting tools that are easy to get, right? Tableau, Click, right? Ones you can just go to their website, you can download a free copy, get it installed, 5 or 10 minutes, you're uploading spreadsheets, which seems great. But the problem is that doesn't really scale, right? When you're going and you're doing that yourself, you have multiple people throughout the organization that are doing the same thing, and nobody really trusts that data because you don't know where did this data come from, How did you get these numbers, right? What formulas were done? You know, how were these KPIs calculated, et cetera? So there's not a lot of trust in the data. So you really want the flexibility of a platform that allows you to have governed data that's controlled and managed by your IT, and being able to blend that with data from your desktop. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So before we get too deep into this, I like to cover some core analytical concepts just to make sure that we all understand what are the moving pieces. I hear people talking about data models, schemas, and measures, and KPIs and dimensions. What does it all mean practically, right? How do I put all that to use to do something impactful in my job? So I want to spend a little bit of time covering some of those core concepts. So you can see the picture we have on the screen. So this is an actual picture of the Infor Loss and Analytics for Birst data model. It's complex. It's been built by experts. They've put thousands of hours in to build this model. And basically the thing that you need to know as a user is what this does is this, I like to say it serves your data up on a platter to you, right? It's easy to get to, right? You don't have to understand where the data resides in what tables. You don't have to know what the joins are. You just get all these little nuggets of business information, and I often refer to them as like Legos, right? They're little things that you can put together in different ways to create whatever it is you need as part of your job. So whether that's rows and columns for operational reporting, whether it's analytics, whether it's dashboards, self-service ad hoc analysis, you just take those bits of information and put them together, and it's all at your fingertips, and it's all of your data, right? This isn't a 3-month snapshot. It's not a 6-month snapshot. It's all of your financial information, all of your supply chain, all of your HR information ready and available for you to use. And so as a user, what does that look like? So I like to point this out. So when I talk about those Legos, that's this first column on the left-hand side here. So this is how the information is presented to you when you go and you leverage that data model to build reports or analytics. The column over here is the Lawson table, where that data resides. And then over here, this is the complex logic that you need to know, right, to get that data out of the system. So when you leverage a data model, you don't need to know any of this stuff, right? Gone are the days of sitting down with your IT colleague and writing stored procedures or figuring out where your data is so you can pull it together and do something with it. It's all right here, ready to be consumed and used. I also like to show then what does that look like, again, to an end user through the technology. So if we've got a screenshot here of Birst, so this shows Visualizer, and you can see here you've got all of your information organized, right? You've got it categorized in a kind of hierarchy, so you can go and select those different areas to find the different measures and attributes that you need. Or you can actually go and you can search for it, and then it'll go find all those different things. So for example, I've searched for inventory here, done a partial search, and it brings you all those bits of information that you can then drag and drop onto the screen. The other thing that's important then is so once you have that data model, you're going to use tools to visualize that data. And there's 3 primary ways that people are going to visualize it. There's a couple tools that you get as part of the Birst suite. So the first one is one that's called Designer. So for those of you that know and love Crystal Reports and still have to keep doing stuff like that, this is the tool, right? You can see here it's got this banded style reporting, so you can do rows and columns. So you have a tool to continue to do that type of reporting going forward. Over here we have Visualizer. That's what you're going to use to create the really cool dashboards, the different visualizations of your data. And then the upper right-hand corner, we just have a screenshot showing that everything you create, whether it's with Designer or with Visualizer, is mobile ready. You don't have to create a second version. You don't have to do it again. Whatever you create using this tooling is going to show up on an iPhone. It's going to show up on an iPad, any mobile device that can view a web page. So those are a couple of the core concepts that I want to make sure we understand going into this. One of the other things I want to talk about is, what's the advantage, right? Why would I pursue an analytics implementation? What am I going to get out of it, right? And it really goes to some of the pain points that we talked about earlier. So having readily accessible ERP data allows you to make better business decisions, and that's key because there is a cost of making bad business decisions. So it allows you to basically go and confirm your gut feel, right? I think this is what I should do. This is what we've done in the past. I think it's right. So it helps you to get rid of that subjectivity in your data decision-making process. So you can be very objective, and then you have data where you can actually back up the decision. You can say, hey, colleague or whoever's you're working with, here's the data that I used to make that decision last week, and this is why I think it makes sense. You're going to have easy access to trusted information. So there's a lot of stuff we can go into about how that works, but basically you've got a centralized repository of your ERP, all your financials, your supply, your HR information, and everybody agrees how those calculations are done, and that's presented and able to be consumed by anybody throughout the organization easily. So it eliminates that silo. So if you're doing financial reporting, if you have 25 people doing financial reporting, when they're all pulling from that same source of truth, you know that that KPI that they're using is the same across all those 25 different reports. Because one of the most dangerous things about not having information is actually spreading inaccurate information throughout the organization. So you want to make sure that they can access it, it's trusted, it's governed, you understand how that data is calculated. And then of course, we advocate with this technology, there's a lot of automation possibilities. We want you to focus on spending less time assembling reports. Eliminate and automate as much of this as you can. You don't have to do these extracts. You don't have to run these legacy, RW, MA, PO reports out of Lawson and then collate them and put them together by hand. There's technology that can automate and take all of that work off your plate, and that's something that's going to free up your time to spend more of it doing more value-add analysis. So lastly, I'd like to leave you with an example before we talk about value-based design. This example I think is an easy way to explain to somebody why would we want to pursue analytics, what are we going to get out of it. And so the example I like to use is in the past how you booked an airline ticket. Right? So in the past, we all know how it worked when we had travel agents, right? You had this man in the middle or woman in the middle between you and your data, right? So you went to them and you said, I want to fly from Minneapolis to New York. I prefer nonstop. I really don't want it to be over $500, and I want it to be under a 6-hour trip. You give them that information. They go, they look at their data sources. They come back to you, right? You iterate over and over, and over the course of hours or days, you eventually find your ticket and you book your trip. So that's the model of how a lot of enterprises are conducting their business today. You have to go to somebody else, explain your requirements, they go and fetch it for you, they come back, you iterate over and over to get that. It takes a lot of time. Versus what we do today, right? So very few people, unless you have a really complex trip, actually use travel agents. Most of us just go to Kayak, Orbitz, Expedia, whatever your favorite travel site is, and we go there, and that's a self-service model, right? You're exploring a massive governed data set. Right? And you go in and you put in your parameters. You say, I want to fly from here to here. This is my preferred airline, etc. And then within a matter of minutes, you whittle down that huge data set to something very specific, right? And then you make a data-driven decision. This is the best flight for me to book. And so that's an example of what you want to try to do for your line of business. So whether you're in finance or supply chain or HR, you want to work with your team and give them the technology to have those types of tools at their fingertips. Obviously not for booking flights, but for doing financial analysis or supply chain analysis or HR analysis. Develop those tools so they don't have to rely on somebody to go get that information for them. They can access it, they can pull up the data, and they can make that data-driven decision. It's often referred to as the consumerization of the enterprise. We take our expectations outside of work and how we access data, which is almost all self-service, and we bring that to work and we wonder why we don't have those same capabilities in the workplace. So as a leader, that's something you want to look to provide to your teams. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to John here shortly. I wanted to cover kind of some of the core analytics concepts. And now what John's going to do is he's going to spend some time talking about the value-based design methodology, explaining what it is, how it works, and how we help you figure out what are those KPIs, what are those visualizations, what are those analysis tools that I need that are going to be impactful and valuable to my line of business. And with that, John, go ahead and run us through value-based design.
Thanks very much. Good day to all. As Aaron mentioned, my name is John Duda. I am the global leader of Birst Solution Consulting at Infor, and I've been doing or working in BI and analytics for over 20 years. I first began actually as a practitioner in the financial services and telecom industries. So I'm very grateful to be here speaking to you all. Our agenda today, first I'll spend just a few minutes explaining, as Aaron mentioned, why value-based design is important and how it's enabled us and RPI and our customers to deliver truly valuable analytics in a rapid and agile fashion. Next, I'll talk a little bit about what value-based design is, and then I'll get into the meat of it, and we'll walk through the process of planning and delivering VBD dashboards with a real-world example of a CFO dashboard in healthcare that we're building out today. So with that, let's jump into it. So to reiterate from one of Aaron's previous slides in defining analytics, how do we deliver how does analytics deliver value? I always like to start with a bit of a provocative statement, and that is that analytics delivers value by enabling better decisions, not by providing information or access to information. It's far more than that. So there are some common perspectives that I've run into in the 20 years I've been doing this. I like to also consider them misconceptions. And they're driven by a more reporting-centric mindset, similar to what Aaron was mentioning earlier, and not a value-centric mindset. And two examples are basically a wall of numbers and a detailed report or reports with many, many filters. And this is analogous to building a legacy approach into a modernized BI platform like Birst. And what we're trying to do is move away from that legacy approach and provide a modernized approach in a modernized platform. So the proverbial wall of numbers, affectionately, that is, blends a lot of data. It creates a behemoth data dump that really answers any possible question a user may have. And it's really not using the full extent of the functionality in a BI platform like Birst to do rapid and agile analytics. It's been commonly built to essentially extract from the tool and then work on a desktop, which also provides issues that Aaron mentioned earlier in terms of single source of truth and governed data. The second approach, many reports with lots of filters, is something that I've seen a lot. Slightly better than the wall of numbers data dump. However, it still requires the user, as Aaron mentioned, the hunt and peck, hunt and gather strategy to spend more time getting to a point where a decision can be made or an action taken using the analytics that's been provided. So we need to help our users succeed. Our goal should be to provide focus, leading to faster, more insightful, and valuable decisions to help our users move forward with better decisions. All right, these two folks should look pretty familiar, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay. Certainly, our goal is we need to provide a guide to the journey of our customers. And without Tenzing, Sir Edmund Hillary certainly wouldn't have made it to the summit of Everest on his own. So our goal is to provide an analytics guide to better business outcomes using value-based design. Okay, so employing a value-based design approach has helped our customers achieve 66% higher BI implementation success rates with 40% less deployment time. I want to share a few points. First, this is just not about the next report or even metric that we're talking about. It's about solving organizational problems. And it's about providing business value in an analytical and data-driven way, as Aaron mentioned. It's a culture shift. BI done right produces $10 of return for every $1 of investment, according to Nucleus Research. Best-in-class analytical-driven companies outperform their industry peers by 2 to 3x across key measures, according to an MIT IBM study. Our approach is really 3 simple steps, and this is what I love about value-based design, is the simplicity and systematic approach. First, there's descriptive reporting, there's diagnostic analytics, and then there's business action insights. So let's get into what is value-based design. It's a conversation. It's a conversation to help you get to the root of the value for analytics in any situation. And then the methodology takes over and ensures that we get to where we want to go. It's really that easy. So in order to get to where we want to go, similar to Aaron's analogy of the airline ticket, we need a map and we need a plan with that map. So basically our map identifies the business value across the organization, all the constituents. So we'll talk about those specific departments in a second. And then the plan actually tracks the various analytic solutions and their value across those various pillars of the organization. And then also helps to sequence the future analytic solutions based on the existing ones being developed. So here we have an example of a value map. Across the top, you'll see various departments within the organization or enterprise. We've got finance, quality, HR, supply chain, and then along the left-hand side, we're identifying the value cases to focus on in each of these departments. So for finance, we're looking at margin and cost, quality, patient satisfaction, readmit percentage, HR, labor costs and employee satisfaction, supply chain, spend actual versus budget, and savings. These are examples of key value cases that affect the business overall and the success of that business. So now we take each of the value cases and we turn them into what we call key value indicators. So we have margin, cost, patient satisfaction. Each of these are owned by various departments, and within those departments, we have executive sponsorship and then users. And then we want to track in that plan where we stand with respect to the overall delivery of this value case and the usage of the value case within each department. So let's talk about delivery. This is what I affectionately call our KVI pyramid. And what we do in value-based design is really a multi-layer approach from the top KVI to the information needed to make the decision and take the action at the user level. So what really is a key value indicator? It's really a single number that someone gets hired and fired for, the most important KPI, the key KPI. In this case, in our healthcare example, we're looking at a couple of examples: margin, cost, patient satisfaction. Those are all considered top-level metrics used to measure primary business performance from a department or business unit. Then we have the drivers. These are the things that make the key value indicator go up or down, or good or bad on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. We're trying to be proactive in our delivery of information that affects that KVI. So many of these can be direct, like net revenue, or indirect, like cases or readmit percentage. And once we have identified the key value indicator and its drivers, we want to understand what the action points are. So who decides? And what do I do when I call who is the person that needs to take action? And what do I need to ask them? So examples of this might be how we organize the business, looking at the head of a site hospital or service line or department. These are the folks that influence the KVI and the drivers that subsequently affect the KVI as well. So now we look at the users. These folks range in different departments as well as across the organization or within departments. So executives, managers, individual contributors. The idea here is to, in an ideal world, present information in an analytic fashion using value-based design to every decision maker in the business. And these folks represent a stratosphere of roles across the organization, starting with the top level. So we looked at C-suite and executive and management roles to help drive the specific KVIs that these dashboards and experiences for other users will be built around. So what's important in each individual user role is, now that we've identified the various top levels of the pyramid and then the various constituents, what is the most impactful decisions each of those users make to improve a KVI or KVI driver. So what that looks like from a margin perspective is finance needs to understand the performance of various service lines and who's driving good performance that would then thus affect profitability. For cost, looking at variations in the supply chain or supply spend. These are great examples of what kinds of decisions and data are needed to affect the KVI in each individual user role. Now that we've identified that, from a decision perspective, we need to identify what data is needed by each user to then take action. So this information has a source, and it's important to understand the source from an integrity perspective and then who owns that source of data. So what we do is we create a source map as a part of the value-based design process. This might be a little too small to read on the presentation, but essentially what we're looking at is by role, what is the KVI, what is the calculation, the decision, and then the various action points and then data source needed in order to build out this hierarchy of analytics. All right, let's talk about how this manifests from a dashboard perspective. Dashboards are just simply an easy way to visualize the business. Tried and true over literally now decades. And what that provides a user is the ability to interact with analytics in a rapid and agile way at scale. And Birst has employed specific capabilities that Aaron went through early on in showing what a dashboard could look like, the level of interactivity, as well as the ad hoc analysis tools available to build the contents of those dashboards. So VB design is really the starting point to enable pervasive analytics across the organization. And the starting point is dashboards. There's really three sets of dashboards that we're focused on in terms of realizing the value of the KVIs. The first is display, the second is moving to diagnose, and then the third is decide. So on the display page, this is essentially where we're going to deliver the individual KVIs and the drivers that support that KVI. So in the example that we're working with, the CFO dashboard as a part of the hospital, this particular KVI might be broken out by hospital and by service line. Costs may be trended, revenue trended, broken out by relevant action points like service line. So not only are we looking at whether the KVI is up or down, we want to be able to, in that same experience, determine what is trending up or down to then take the next step. So now we're in the diagnosis phase. How do I spot the outlier? Once I know something is an issue, where do I go to identify the specifics of that issue? Which one isn't like the other one, essentially? So in the diagnosis page, the idea is to build a number of analytics that support the above level KVI and drivers from a diagnosis of perspective that leads to action. So generally a diagnosis page is organized by either the driver information that we're talking about, in this case, cost, revenue, and patient satisfaction, or an action point like a site, service line, or department. Finally, the detail page is really where I am able to pick up the phone, send an email, congratulate someone on a great job, or figure out what's going on from an issue perspective with a potential, with a particular KVI based on the driver and based on the diagnosis that I've done. So essentially, this is the map that we've created for this particular use case, where on the display page, we have a KVI like margin, a driver like cost, and patient satisfaction. And then in the diagnosis page, we're looking at cost by supply, labor, patient satisfaction by readmit percentage. And then on the decide page, we're able to look at, for example, physician ranking, service line rank, and then additional detail with respect to being able to take action. And I think what's really important here is to look at the combination of Birst and RPI and the information, the value, the experience, the years of understanding Infor systems in combination with the value-based design approach to deliver the best VBD design dashboards for your organization. So Aaron, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thanks, John. So what I want to do is talk now a little bit about some of the best practices that we found from having done these implementations over the years, and give you some critical information to consider. So first of all, one of the things we recommend is do not start from scratch. If you want to do reporting and analytics out of your ERP, if you don't leverage something like Infor's loss and analytics for Birst, your first step is to do data modeling and to do data warehousing and to do all that work. Infor has done that all for you. Any Cloud Suite customers get that as part of the product. Any V10 customer that wants to modernize the reporting that they're doing today and realize some efficiency gains can implement this. All the stuff that we're showing is available on V10 and works with your V10 instance today. You do not have to go to Cloud Suite to get Cloud Suite style reporting. So there's 375 plus pre-built KPIs and metrics. It certainly isn't going to be everything that you need for reporting, but it's a really good start, right? You're going to get a lot of the common KPIs delivered out of the box, and that's going to allow you to focus your time on enabling self-service, on going through the value-based design process, and developing those analytical tools you need, rather than going and trying to figure out how you're going to do your own model. So to assist with that, one of the things that we do, the RPI plus Birst implementation methodology has an assessment that we do during the pre-sales cycle, where we send a functional subject matter expert with deep knowledge of the loss and subject matter area. So it could be someone that is 20 plus years in finance or 15 years of supply chain experience. Maybe they were a director before they joined RPI to consult. But you need those experts to come in as part of the assessment, and they're going to lead that, because one of the problems that we've seen is when other people try to implement and they take a technology first approach, it's great to have somebody on site, to come and work with you that knows the technology and all the capabilities of what they can do. But they're not viewed by a peer as a business, right? We're often coming in and we're working with the director of finance or supply chain or HR to help them improve their operations and to make better decisions. And in order to lead that discussion, you need to have somebody that's viewed as a peer. You need to have somebody that speaks finance or speaks supply chain. And so that's why we send those subject matter experts on site to conduct this assessment. They also need to come in and challenge the status quo, and that's something that you're only going to get from someone that has that credibility, right? Who understands the pains and the challenges that you have of doing financial reporting or supply chain reporting. They're going to come in and make sure that you don't just take, that pile of 500 LBI reports and those crystal reports and those Excel spreadsheets, and you don't just try to re-implement those in a new technology. They're going to help you think things through and use a process-driven methodology to develop things that are going to be tied to value. It's important for them to level set expectations. So we talked about the pre-built content that Infor provides. They provide you a robust, extensible data model. They provide you with pre-built content that's also extensible and you can add to. But they need to level set expectations. They need to work with you to make sure that you understand what is or isn't in the data model. Does it provide me everything that I need for reporting or not? If it doesn't, then we do a gap analysis. But then going into the project, okay, this data model services 90% of our needs, but we know we're going to have to do these extensions. And the pre-built content is great, but we know we're going to have to add some stuff to it. And those things basically then get tailored into the implementation plan. So before you commit to doing your project, it's very clear what are the deliverables, what work needs to be done, and what's the value that's going to be realized as part of this process. Our subject matter experts will also work with you to identify those opportunities for improvement, and then they're going to help you quantify the business value for the project. One of the things that we do almost every customer we work with is we come in and we help them do automation. It's not uncommon when we're having initial discussions with customers that they say anywhere between 25 to 75% of their team's time is spent doing those hunting and gathering activities that I referred to before, going and getting information from different systems, putting it together, collating P135 reports and figuring out how to get it in the right format so I can send it off to the executives. There's a significant amount of time that's spent with that type of work. And there's technology that can automate all those processes for you. So Infor loss and analytics for Birst, you heard me talk about that. We saw the data model. We talked about why you care about a data model and how you'd use it. This is just some information that's useful for you to know that it is available today for finance and supply chain. It works in Cloud Suite. It works on V10. HCM analytics are coming out soon, so they'll be readily available. That's going to be for Cloud Suite customers. And basically, we want you to think about how you can modernize your reporting today. So if you are a V10 customer, you can get that Cloud Suite style reporting today. You can get the analytics, you can get the dashboards, the automation. You don't have to wait until you go to Cloud Suite to take advantage of this technology. One of the other points we like to point out, if you're a customer that purchased healthcare analytics, which was kind of the previous iteration of Infor Loss and Analytics for Birst, if you bought that and either implemented it or have own that license, you get a free upgrade to Infor Loss and Analytics for Birst. So if you're a V10 customer, you own healthcare analytics, the data model, the pre-built content, it's all yours for free. So a couple other points we like to talk about is, a lot of people think that when they can't start a project like this until their data is perfect, right? And I'm here to say we've worked with a lot of customers. Your data is never going to be literally perfect, but what we advocate is, start out now. We're going to get from good to better to best, right? And that's an iterative process. The other thing is that don't feel like you have to know everything right off the bat as far as, okay, well, yes, I want to do improve financial reporting, but I'm not sure of all the KPIs or what are the analytical tools. That's what we're there for, right? We're going to help you figure that out. We're going to go through that iterative process to help you define those KPIs and make sure through that value-based design methodology that you develop and deliver content that's meaningful to your line of business. Everything you need is available now to do this. The only things you need are Infor Loss and Analytics for Birst and then your Birst licenses. And again, we advocate that you migrate from if you're still on LBI and you're looking for a path forward, this is the way to go. If you're wondering about, what does that look like for all my LBI reports, we often, work with customers and they say, I have 500 or I have 1,000 LBI reports, and man, I really don't want to move those to new reporting technology. Well, the good news is you don't have to, and you shouldn't, right? What we recommend as to address that issue is that you leave those LBI reports where they are, right? Just leave them up, leave them running. They're not going to go anywhere. And we can go through this value-based design process, develop the new stuff and leave it and deploy that. And what you're going to see is you leave those systems running in tandem, and people are going to self-migrate. They're going to stop using the LBI stuff because they're going to realize they've got all the data at their fingertips. It's through a modern UI. They've done the automation, and they're going to self-migrate off of that LBI instance. And when nobody's using it anymore, then you just shut it off. So you absolutely do not think that you have to bring forward all of those LBI reports that are being used today.